grade 2, it's time for math. Do you remember what this word means from yesterday's lesson? Perimeter. Perimeter. Some of you remember. It means the measure of a distance around, measuring the distance around. Today's math page will only make sense after you hear this lesson. So I'm just going to start. Today's math page is found in your Math Makes Sense book on page 204. Now, for this lesson, if we were in our class, then I would be using some painter's tape, which is green or blue or different colors. Some painter's tape to tape some objects, some shapes that are straight edged on our floor of the classroom. And then you would be working in your detective teams, your small group teams, to measure the sides or the outsides, the area, the distance around each of those objects. So I'd be making shapes on the floor like figures A, B, and C that are seen on my page here. But we are not going to be able to be in our classroom. So for today's activity, you have two choices. You could ask your parents if they have painter's tape. Don't just use any tape. It's important that it's painter's tape because it comes off your floor easier without leaving big marks behind. If they have any painter's tape that you could use to tape shapes on the floor, or if you have a big wall space that they are good with, you taping on a wall space some shapes. Be careful not to make them too big or too small. They should be medium sized. You can use these shapes that I have here. The important thing is to have straight edges so that you can measure. The other idea is if you don't have painter's tape or if your parents are not okay with you, that's okay. You don't have to use that method. You could also find objects around your home. I would encourage you to find 3 or 4 objects. So I brought some examples from my home that you could use a similar idea. Maybe a picture frame that you have. Notice there are straight edges. So you can measure the perimeter of a picture frame. Make sure each object that you choose is various sizes. You could choose a gift card, maybe a crayon box. I have these letter stencil templates, or maybe a book. So you're measuring the distance around. So you will also need for this activity, you will need to, after you've chosen 3 or 4 objects, or that you've taped out some shapes, you will also need a measuring tool. So you could use a ruler. And if your sides of your figures or objects are longer than your ruler, make sure that you mark out where the ruler ends and add on from there. Or if you have a measuring tape, you could use a measuring tape to measure around the distance around your objects or your shapes that you have taped out. When you are using a ruler or a tape measure, be sure to use the correct edge. Usually rulers or measuring tapes have both inches and centimeters. And for our class, for learning in Canada, we are using the metric system, which is a big word, or important word that means to use centimeters and meters, decimeters for measuring the standard units of measure. All right, so let's make sure that you use the correct edge. And you can ask a grown-up or an older sibling to help you with that. But I'm just going to tell you quickly that to tell a quick way to tell the difference between inches and centimeters is that for centimeters, the lines come closer together, or the increments are closer together than inches. So this measuring tape that I'm borrowing from Mr. Bosch is not going to be helpful for my learning today because it only has inches on it. So then I'm going to use I would use my ruler. And if you look at this ruler, you'll see that it has numbers that are closer together, and it has the cm symbol here to show that it is centimeters. And on the other side, flip it over, then it has numbers that are more spaced out, spread out. Those are the inches. You can see the symbol for inches here. So just a helpful tool, helpful hints for how to use your tools properly. All right, so once you have your shapes taped out or chosen from your home, you're ready to start. You need to measure the distance around. Do you remember from yesterday's lesson that I gave you some hints and instructions for how to measure a distance around? Yeah, that's right. We need to measure it in sections. So yesterday you had practice for measuring parts of a line. So and then you had to add up those segments, those parts of the line to get the total length of the line. That works the same way when you're measuring the distance around. Measure each line segment of the shape, the closed shape, and you will find when you add up those line segments, you will get the perimeter, the total length of the distance around each object. And that is called perimeter. I've highlighted the rim part because that's a way that it's helpful for me to remember that perimeter talks about the outside edge, the rim of an object. So on page 204, it says, draw pictures of the figures you measured. Simple enough now that you know what they're talking about. Inside each figure, so inside each of the figures that you've taped out and that you've drawn in your book, including your objects if you chose to do that, write the distance around. So if the distance around was 153 centimeters, then inside the figure that you've drawn, you're going to print the number 153 cm for centimeters. On the bottom it says use pictures, numbers, or words to tell how you found the distance around. This is where you will write your number sentences that shows the numbers that you added together to get the sum that equals the perimeter. You could also tell with a sentence, I added each segment up to get the total number. And you could also draw pictures to show draw the figures again. This time, instead of just writing the number of the total for the perimeter in the center, you would write the number of the distance for each side of your figure to show your work in a picture form. Once you're finished page 204 today, if you're looking for an extension activity, an additional activity, then your additional activity is found on task card 2. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you have any questions, be sure to email me or have your parents email me, and then I'll help you through that. All right? Have a great day.